Hello, my name is Tom Fowler, and I'd like to talk to you today about finding garnets around Atlanta. Now, most of you are familiar with garnets as faceted purple gemstones, easily available in necklaces, rings, other jewelry, but there are other forms that garnets take and other uses for garnet besides just jewelry. So, in order to get you to find garnets, I'd like to talk to you first about what they are and show you some of the different varieties of garnets. Then I'd like to talk about why they're here, why you find garnets around Atlanta, and finally show you some ways to find them, what they look like out there in the wild. So, first, garnets are minerals. In fact, they're a whole family of minerals that are variations on a real simple type of formula. They're metal atoms usually that are involved with a silicate tetrahedron. And these can fit in various places on the tetrahedron. That affects things like the color and size of garnets and how durable they are. Also, it affects on how rare they are. So these have properties that are very similar to other silicate minerals, gemstones even like topaz or zircon. But the garnets themselves have a range of properties and a range of colors. These are some of the different colors that you can find with garnets. Although most of the garnets you're going to see around Atlanta are going to be like this, kind of a purple-red, deep hue. And you don't really find garnets by looking for the color. You look for the shape of them. But we'll get into that when we start talking about how to find garnets. Most of the garnets you're going to find around Atlanta are going to be of this deep red to purple variety. And although they're not necessarily gemstone quality, they can be used very interestingly in jewelry. For instance, this is a deep red gemstone, but when I illuminate it with a light, you can see that there's an awful lot of little cracks and faults in there and little inclusions of material that don't make a very good transparent gemstone. These would be unacceptable in something like a diamond or a sapphire. But in garnet jewelry, they're usually just fine. Now, these are set up this way. They have impurities and things because most of the garnets that you find around here aren't pure garnet of one type or another. They're mixes of garnets, and they have other material in them. This is because Atlanta and North Georgia in particular are part of a large metamorphic belt that has existed for a long time. These were originally sediments that got buried very deeply and then compressed and heated as the plates of North America and Africa ran into each other several times before separating finally. Garnets finally came up to a surface, and now you can find them in a band that stretches from the northeast corner of Georgia all the way up by North Carolina, all the way down to, say, central South Georgia, roughly where I-20 runs into Alabama. And there are plenty of places in that band where you will see garnets in the rocks themselves, and a few places south and east in that where garnets have washed out of the rock and are now deposited in streams and in sediments farther down. So we have a county map here showing the counties of Georgia, and the ones that are shaded in are places where notable finds of garnets have been made, usually fairly large garnets or interesting looking garnets. This doesn't mean that the counties next to them don't have garnets. They probably do, but you may have to look a little harder for them. Now, most of these have some kind of garnet, but garnets aren't usually mined to be jewelry. There are other uses for garnet. You can take garnet, crush it up, and you get very sharp little shards of granites. Crush them finer, and you can get garnet sand that's very abrasive. So garnet sand is used as an abrasive for sandblasting things, or you can glue it to paper. And you have sandpaper. Garnet sandpaper used to be a big thing, although some synthetic garnets are being used now in place of the natural ones. It is worth noting that this is not a very lucrative market. In fact, nobody right now is doing any mining for garnets, either for jewelry or for abrasives in Georgia. There are other places in the country where this happens, but this isn't the kind of thing that you're going to get rich on. And that brings us to an important point. Hunting for garnets is not going to make you rich. So there are some very important things to think about when you're out there looking for them. First, respect private property, especially property that happens to be in mines or quarries, where rock falls can seriously injure you, or you could get arrested for trespassing. Also, most public parks have got a policy about not collecting things inside the park, and certainly not making any holes with a shovel. So when you can find garnets like these for about $5 or $6 in a rock shop, it's not worth your time or effort. Put yourself in danger. That being said, there are a lot of cool places where you can go and find garnets, and it's kind of interesting to say to your friend, hey, you're stepping on garnets here. And that's kind of cool. Garnets are hard and can scratch steel, but they're also kind of brittle, which means that garnets can be eroded away fairly easily. When they get eroded, the water molecules get in there and they separate the metal atoms from the silicate, and what you get is rust and clay, and these quickly can wash away, leaving you with holes. I've got some pebbles that I've taken from a North Georgia stream that show this type of activity. You can see garnets in here, the little red spots, but garnets vary from being very solid to just being little rust stains on the surface of the rock. And there are some places where you can see just little garnet-shaped cavities. And that's all that's left. The garnet has completely left the building and is washed downstream. The reason this happens with these pebbles is that they're being tumbled over and over again in a stream. And so they bash into each other. And that allows water to get in through cracks in the rock and eventually change the garnet entirely. The main way to find garnets is not to look for purple rocks. It's to look for garnet-shaped objects. Garnets are interesting in that they have what's called a cubic crystal structure. They don't look like cubes. Instead, they have 3 symmetrical axes at right angles to each other, and each axis is the same length. So garnets tend to have a shape that's pretty similar no matter which size garnet you get into. Garnets in the wild are easy to recognize because they look like garnets. You look and see these little mineral-looking shapes in the rocks at your feet. And these can be roughly the same kind of shape, whether or not these are all the way down to river sand, or they're up to the biggest garnet that's been found in the world so far, which was up in Norway. And it's about 8 feet long and weighs 80,000 pounds. It's really ugly, but it still looks like a garnet. So, here are some samples of rocks that I picked up just north of Atlanta. And these ones are still in their parent rock. You can see that the shape you're supposed to be looking for stands out pretty well, this angular shape, from the rock behind it. The rock behind it has got a little bit of shiny mica in there. And you can even see one place here where one of the garnets got away. There's nothing here but a garnet-shaped hole. These are some of the garnets that got loose and I collected later. And they look kind of rusty and maybe some clay on the top. This is the weathering product of garnet. I took one of these and brushed it off a little bit, ran it under water, and you can see it gets a little bit of its purple color back. But there's really no way that this is eventually going to become a gemstone. It's still a nice little sample of garnet though. These occur in all sorts of different formations. Sometimes you have rocks that are mostly silvery mica, and the garnets will stand out. I had a young rock hound from Tallapoosa send me some pictures of rocks that he had found close to his house. And with these you can see the garnets standing out just like the ones do in this picture. Again, all of the garnets you're going to be seeing are probably going to be in rock like this, rather than floating around, unless you're panning for garnets in a stream, because they don't just kind of show up on the surface as rolling rocks. If you're out hiking or running around Atlanta, you'll probably run into rocks that have little sparkly bits. And these sparkly bits are mica. Mica is a metamorphic rock as well, and a lot of times if you see mica in the sand or dirt where you're running, it's very likely you're going to see it in any rocks around there, and you may find garnets in those rocks as well. So start looking for things that are outcrops of rock. These can be flat surfaces where the rock is just lying there like a stair step, or they can be real small places where the rock shows up along the side of the trail. They don't have to be cliffs. All you're looking for is a little exposure. In these two rocks, I'm seeing garnets all through these, along with the sparkly stuff. All of these little dark spots here, roughly the size of peppercorns, are garnets. And you can see in this one where you have garnet-shaped holes where the garnets have fallen out or have been eroded away. If you're looking at these from the top down, say they're on a flat rock surface, this is what you're going to see, this kind of peppercorn effect. If you're looking at the side of a garnet formation, you may see them sprinkled in among the layers, kind of like raisin bread. And again, they'll be all through the whole formation, so you'll see garnets on both sides. These aren't the kind of garnets you're going to be able to collect very easily, even though you may be able to pry them out with a fingernail. These garnets are very small. The ones you might see might come from streams. And streams will do one more thing to garnets. They'll sort them into different sizes based on the amount of energy in the stream. So bigger garnets need more energy from the water to move them around. If you're looking for bigger garnets, look for the places where the water's got the most energy. And you may have to do this when the water level is quite a lot farther down than, say, here in wintertime. But yes, you can find garnets in sand, and they will rattle around nicely, and some of them will have very good shape. You can find garnets all the way down to sand size. This particular vial was taken while I was panning for gold, and it includes a lot of dark black iron sand, which is also heavy. Garnet is considerably heavier than quartz, so the iron sand and the garnet sand will sink to the bottom of your gold pan if you're out there panning for gold, and you can collect them both at the same time. The garnet sand shows up as little bitty yellowish flakes or light red flakes, because at that point they're thin enough so that light can get in, whereas with the bigger garnets they stop light pretty close to the surface. Okay, so now you should be equipped to find garnets. Use the county map that I showed earlier to try and find counties where garnets have been found already, or counties next to those where they're likely to show up anyhow. Then go out and look for things like sparkly sand, showing that there's mica there, that you're near metamorphic rocks. Then start looking for outcrops, flat areas of rock, or places where the rock is exposed a little bit by the side of your trail. And finally, look for those little faceted nuggets that mean you really have garnets. So good luck, and I hope that you come home with buckets of them.